I was cleaning my garage when a police officer knocked on my door. "Sir, your wife was in a fatal car accident an hour ago." It was impossible. "No, she's upstairs asleep." The officer looked confused. I led him upstairs to our bedroom. Officer drew his weapon. "Sir," he said, "step away from her. That isn't—" The woman in my bed looked exactly like my wife. Same auburn hair, same birthmark on her shoulder, same wedding ring I'd placed on her finger 9 years ago. But according to the police, my actual wife, Jessica Monroe, was lying dead in the county morgue after her Toyota Camry had been T-boned by a semi-truck on Interstate 40. My name is Carter Monroe. I'm 35 years old, and I run a small accounting firm in suburban Nashville. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. I do taxes for local businesses, help people file their returns, and go home to my wife every night at 6 o'clock p.m. like clockwork. Or at least, I thought I did. The officer standing in my bedroom doorway was named Travis Kellerman. Young guy, probably late 20s, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested this was the strangest call he'd ever responded to. His hand was still on his holster, but he hadn't fully drawn his weapon. Not yet. "Mr. Monroe," Officer Kellerman said slowly, his eyes never leaving the woman in my bed. "When was the last time you saw your wife?" "This morning," I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "She was tired, said she was going to take a nap. That was around 10 o'clock a.m. I've been in the garage since then, organizing old files." The woman in the bed stirred, opening her eyes slowly. When she saw the police officer, she sat up quickly, pulling the blanket around herself. "Carter, what's going on? Why is there a cop in our bedroom?" Her voice was perfect. The slight rasp she got when she first woke up, the way she said my name with that tiny uptick at the end. Everything about her was Jessica. Officer Kellerman took a step back. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Jessica Monroe," she said, looking at him like he was insane. "Obviously. This is my house. Who are you? Can you provide identification?" Jessica reached for the nightstand, pulling out her wallet from the drawer where she always kept it. She handed Officer Kellerman her driver's license. He studied it for a long moment, then pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I need a supervisor at 2847 Maple Grove Drive immediately, and I need someone from the morgue to send over photos of the DOA from the I-40 accident." "Copy that, Unit 47. Supervisor is en route. ETA 10 minutes. Jessica was looking at me now, genuine fear in her eyes. "Carter, what is he talking about? What accident?" I sat down on the edge of the bed, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. "Jess, they said you died in a car accident an hour ago." "That's impossible. I've been asleep all day. I had that migraine, remember? I took my medication and went to bed." "Officer," Kellerman was still watching her like she might transform into something else at any moment. "Ma'am, where is your vehicle currently parked?" "In the garage," Jessica said. "Same place it always is." "Mr. Monroe, is her vehicle in the garage?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw it when I was cleaning. It's been there all morning." The supervisor arrived 15 minutes later, a stocky woman in her 40s named Captain Andrea Hayes. She brought 3 more officers with her, and suddenly my quiet suburban bedroom felt like a crime scene. Jessica had gotten dressed by then, throwing on jeans and a sweater, and we'd moved downstairs to the living room. Captain Hayes sat across from us, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. and Mrs. Monroe, I need to ask you both some very specific questions, and I need complete honesty from both of you." "Of course," I said. Jessica just nodded, her hand gripping mine so tightly it hurt. "Mrs. Monroe, do you have any siblings? Specifically a twin?" Jessica frowned. "No, I'm an only child. My parents, Robert and Linda Hayes, had trouble conceiving. I was their miracle baby, or so they always told me." "And you've never been contacted by anyone claiming to be related to you? No strange phone calls, no mysterious letters?" "No, nothing like that. Captain Hayes, what's going on? Who was in that accident?" The captain exchanged glances with Officer Kellerman, then pulled out her phone. She swiped through some photos, then turned the screen toward us. "Is this you, Mrs. Monroe?" The photo showed a woman's face, peaceful in death. No visible injuries, just closed eyes and slightly parted lips. And she looked exactly like Jessica. Exactly. Same face, same hair color, same everything. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, that's me. But it's not me. How is that possible? I stared at the photo, feeling like reality was slipping away from me. This doesn't make sense. People don't just have exact doubles walking around. Actually, Captain Hayes said carefully, they do. But it's extremely rare. We're talking about doppelgangers, people who are genetically unrelated but look remarkably similar. However, she paused, choosing her words carefully. The level of similarity we're seeing here suggests something else entirely. What do you mean? Jessica asked. I mean, we need to run DNA tests on both of you. If you're watching this and finding yourself as confused and terrified as I was in that moment, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment below telling me what you think is happening here. And smash that like button because this story is about to get even more twisted than you can imagine. The DNA tests took 3 days. 3 days of living in my house with a woman who looked like my wife, sounded like my wife, but who might not be my wife at all. 3 days of second-guessing every memory, every moment we'd shared. 3 days of waking up in the middle of the night and staring at her sleeping face, wondering if I was looking at a stranger. Jessica, or whoever she was, seemed just as disturbed as I was. She moved through our house like a ghost, touching familiar objects with uncertain fingers. The coffee mug she always used, the spot on the couch where she liked to read, the photo albums filled with pictures of our life together. I remember all of it, she said one night, sitting at our kitchen table with tears streaming down her face. Our first date at that Italian restaurant on Broadway. The way you proposed at the Botanical Gardens. Our wedding at your parents' farm. I remember your mother crying during the vows, and how your best friend Drew gave that terrible speech about the time you got drunk in college. I remember everything, Carter. How can I remember all of that if I'm not me? I didn't have an answer, because she did remember everything. Every detail was perfect, right down to the color of the tablecloths at our wedding and the song that had been playing when I proposed. On the third day, Captain Hayes called and asked us to come to the station. We drove in silence, Jessica staring out the window at a world that suddenly didn't make sense anymore. The police station conference room was small and windowless, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Captain Hayes was there, along with a woman in a white coat who introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Coleman from the State Forensics Lab. Thank you for coming, Dr. Coleman said, settling into a chair across from us. She had a manila folder in front of her, and I could see the edges of lab reports poking out. I've reviewed the DNA analysis from both Mrs. Monroe and the deceased woman from the accident, and the results are unprecedented. Just tell us, Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. Am I real? Am I Jessica Monroe? Dr. Coleman opened the folder, spreading out several documents. Genetically, you are both Jessica Monroe. The DNA is identical. Not similar, not close, but identical, which should be impossible. I leaned forward. What do you mean, should be impossible? Identical DNA only occurs in one scenario, identical twins. Twins who developed from the same fertilized egg. But even then, there are subtle differences that develop over time. Environmental factors, random mutations. What we're seeing here is perfect genetic identity. It's as if one of you is a clone of the other. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Clone. Jessica laughed, but it sounded hysterical. That's insane. Human cloning isn't real. It's science fiction. Technically, you're correct, Dr. Coleman said carefully. Human cloning for reproductive purposes is illegal in the United States and most countries. But that doesn't mean it hasn't been attempted. There have been rumors, whispers in the scientific community about underground labs, private facilities working outside legal boundaries. So, what are you saying? I asked. That my wife is a clone, or that the dead woman is a clone? How do we even know which is which? Captain Hayes cleared her throat. We need to go back further. Mr. Monroe, when did you meet your wife? 9 years ago, I said, at a coffee shop downtown. She was reading a book. I accidentally spilled my coffee on her table, and we started talking. Mrs. Monroe, do you remember that day? Jessica nodded. Of course. He was so embarrassed, kept apologizing. We ended up talking for 3 hours. He walked me home, and I gave him my number. And before that day, Mrs. Monroe, What do you remember about your childhood? Jessica frowned, thinking. I grew up in a small town called Riverside, about 2 hours from here. My parents ran a general store. I went to Riverside Elementary, then Riverside High. After graduation, I moved to Nashville for college. Do you have yearbooks, childhood photos, documents from that time? Some, Jessica said. Most of my childhood stuff is at my parents' house. Captain Hayes and Dr. Coleman exchanged another look. Mrs. Monroe, the captain said gently, we checked the town of Riverside. There is no general store registered to Robert and Linda Hayes. In fact, we can't find any record of them living there at all. The color drained from Jessica's face. That's impossible. They lived there for 30 years. We'd like permission to examine whatever documentation you have, Dr. Coleman said. Birth certificates, school records, anything from before you moved to Nashville. That's when it hit me. In 9 years of marriage, I'd never met Jessica's parents. She always said they were private people, didn't like to travel. We'd talked about visiting them, but something always came up. Work obligations, health issues, reasons that seemed perfectly legitimate at the time, but now felt like carefully constructed excuses. Jess, I said slowly, where are your parents right now? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Her eyes went distant like she was searching for a memory that wouldn't quite surface. They're in Riverside, at the house. When was the last time you talked to them? I don't... Her face crumpled. Carter, I can't remember. Why can't I remember? Dr. Coleman was making notes. This is consistent with implanted memories. If someone wanted to create a convincing duplicate of a person, they'd need to implant the original's memories. But the process isn't perfect. Deeper, more emotional memories transfer better than factual details like phone numbers or specific dates. You're saying someone made a copy of me? Jessica's voice was rising. And put fake memories in my head? Why? Why would anyone do that? That's what we need to figure out, Captain Hayes said. But first we need to identify the deceased woman. Because if you're the original Jessica Monroe, then who was she? And if she's the original, then who are you? The question echoed in my mind long after we left the police station. Who? Was my wife? And more terrifyingly, who had I been living with? We drove to my parents' house that evening. They lived an hour outside Nashville on the same farm where I'd grown up. My father, Gerald Monroe, was a retired veterinarian, and my mother, Christine, had been a school teacher for 40 years. They were good people, honest people, and I needed to talk to someone who still felt real. They were shocked when I told them everything. My mother cried, holding Jessica's hands like she could verify her authenticity through touch alone. My father, ever the practical man, asked the logical questions. Son, have you noticed anything strange about Jessica's behavior? Anything different in the past few months? I thought about it carefully. No, nothing. She's been exactly the same as always. Same routines, same preferences, same everything. What about before you met her? Mom asked Jessica. Do you remember your life before Carter? Jessica's face contorted with concentration. I remember impressions, feelings, but when I try to think about specific events, it's like looking through fog. I remember being happy as a child. I remember my father teaching me to ride a bike. But I can't picture his face clearly. I can't remember the color of my childhood bedroom or the name of my best friend in elementary school. And that never struck you as odd? Dad asked gently. I thought it was normal, Jessica whispered. People forget things from childhood, right? I thought everyone had vague memories of being young. We stayed at my parents' house that night. I couldn't sleep, lying in my old bedroom with Jessica curled up beside me. She was crying softly, and I held her, not knowing what else to do. Carter, she whispered in the darkness. What if I'm not real? What if I'm just something that was created in a lab? What if everything I feel, everything I think I am, is just programming? You're real to me, I said, because it was the only truth I had left. Whatever happened, whoever you are, you're the woman I fell in love with. That has to count for something. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. The breakthrough came 5 days later. Captain Hayes called with news that changed everything. We identified the deceased woman, she said. Her name was Samantha Pierce. She was reported missing from a small town in Oregon 15 years ago. She was 20 years old when she disappeared. How is that possible? I asked. The woman in that accident looked 30, maybe 35. Exactly. If Samantha Pierce had lived, she'd be 35 now. The woman in the morgue looks exactly the right age. So what does that mean? It means we think Samantha Pierce was the original, and we think she's been kept alive somewhere for the past 15 years, possibly for the purpose of creating duplicates. The word sent chills down my spine. Duplicates. Plural. How many? I asked. We don't know. But Mr. Monroe, we need to ask you something important. Has your wife ever had any unexplained medical appointments? Any periods where she was away and couldn't account for her time? I thought back over our 9 years together. There was one time, about 2 years ago. She said she was going to a spa retreat with some college friends. She was gone for a week. When she came back, she seemed different somehow. More settled. But I thought it was just the relaxation. We need the name of that spa. I found it in Jessica's old emails. Mountain Serenity Wellness Center, located in rural Montana. When Captain Hayes ran a search, she found something interesting. The wellness center had closed abruptly 3 years ago. The property was sold to a shell corporation that couldn't be traced. We're sending a team to investigate the property, Captain Hayes said. But Mr. Monroe, I need to prepare you for what we might find. What do you mean? If this is what we think it is, if someone has been creating duplicates of Samantha Pierce, possibly of other people, this is bigger than just your situation. This could be an organized operation, and we need to figure out why. That night, I sat Jessica down and told her everything. She listened in silence, her face growing paler with each word. So I might be a replacement, she said finally. Someone created me to take the place of the real Jessica Monroe. Why? What's the point? I don't know. But Jess, I need to ask you something. That spa retreat 2 years ago. Do you actually remember it? Or is it just another foggy memory? She closed her eyes, concentrating. After a long moment, she shook her head. I don't remember anything about it. I know I went. I know I came back. But the actual days there? Nothing. It's like a blank space in my mind. What if that's when it happened? What if that's when you were created? Then where's the real Jessica? Where's the original? We didn't have an answer to that question. Not yet. The FBI got involved after Captain Hayes filed her report. The lead agent was a man named Derek Foster, mid-40s with gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too much. He set up a command center at the police station and brought in specialists, geneticists, psychologists, tech experts. Mr. Monroe, Agent Foster said during our first meeting, we've been investigating rumors of illegal cloning operations for years, but we've never had solid evidence until now. Your wife, or rather, the woman living as your wife, is that evidence? So what happens to her? I asked, feeling protective despite everything. Is she going to be taken away? Studied like some lab rat? That's not our intention, Agent Foster assured me. But we need her cooperation. We need to understand how this was done, and more importantly, why. Jessica, to her credit, agreed to help. She underwent more tests, more interviews, hours of psychological evaluation. The doctors determined that while her memories before meeting me were implanted and vague, everything since had been real. She'd lived a genuine life, experienced real emotions, been a real person in every way that mattered. The question, Dr. Coleman explained, is whether she's meant to be a replacement or a backup. What's the difference? I asked. A replacement would mean the original Jessica Monroe is dead, and your wife was created to take her place. But a backup suggests the original might still be alive somewhere, and your wife is insurance. A spare, if you will. The thought made me sick. The Montana investigation turned up exactly what Agent Foster had feared. The property that had housed the Mountain Serenity Wellness Center was actually a front for a sophisticated cloning facility. They found evidence of at least 15 different subjects, women who'd been reported missing over the past 2 decades, all kept in medically induced comas, while their genetic material was harvested. Samantha Pierce had been there. They found her records, photographs, medical charts spanning 15 years. But the facility had been abandoned 6 months earlier, and all the subjects had been moved to an unknown location. Someone knew we were getting close, Agent Foster said grimly. They shut down the operation and relocated. But they got sloppy. They let one of the duplicates out into the world without proper monitoring. Samantha, I said. The woman who died in the accident. Exactly. We think she was being transported to a new facility when she escaped. The accident was real, just bad timing. But why? Jessica asked. She'd been sitting quietly through the briefing, but now she stood up, her voice shaking with anger. Why would someone do this? What's the point of creating copies of people? Agent Foster pulled up a series of photographs on his laptop. Women of various ages, all reported missing, all matching profiles found at the Montana facility. We think it's about identity theft on a massive scale. Create a duplicate of someone, eliminate the original, and you have a perfect replacement who can access bank accounts, properties, everything. But I didn't eliminate anyone, Jessica protested. I've been living my life. I haven't stolen anything. Which suggests you weren't meant for that purpose, Dr. Coleman said thoughtfully. You were created for a different reason. The question is, what? The answer came from an unexpected source. My mother. She called 3 days after the Montana revelation, her voice urgent. Carter, I found something in the attic. Old photos from when you and Jessica first started dating. I was putting them in an album, and I noticed something strange. What kind of strange? There's a woman in the background of several photos. Same woman, different occasions. It's like she was following you. Can you send me the photos? When they arrived via email, I saw exactly what she meant. A blonde woman in her 50s, always at a distance, always slightly out of focus. But she was there in the coffee shop where Jessica and I had met, in the parking lot of the restaurant where I'd proposed, at our wedding, standing at the edge of the crowd. I showed the photos to Agent Foster. He ran facial recognition and got a hit immediately. Dr. Caroline Mitchell, he said, pulling up her file. Geneticist, worked for several pharmaceutical companies before her license was revoked 20 years ago for ethical violations. She was experimenting with human cloning, trying to create what she called perfect humans. The medical board shut her down, but she disappeared before they could prosecute. Why would she be following me and Jessica? Agent Foster studied the photos carefully. Mr. Monroe, I need to ask you something personal. Have you and your wife ever discussed having children? We tried, I said, for years, but Jessica couldn't get pregnant. We went to fertility specialists, but they couldn't find anything wrong. It just never happened. Did the specialists run genetic tests on your wife? Yes, extensive ones. Everything came back normal. Agent Foster leaned back in his chair thinking. What if that was the point? What if your wife was created specifically because the original couldn't have children? What if Dr. Mitchell was trying to solve a fertility problem? The pieces started clicking into place. Jessica's parents who didn't exist. The foggy childhood memories. The spa retreat where she'd disappeared for a week, possibly when she'd been created or activated. And most telling of all, the inability to conceive despite no medical reason. You're saying I was created to be Carter's wife? Jessica's voice was hollow. That I'm some kind of custom-made replacement? We think Dr. Mitchell has been running a service, Agent Foster said carefully. Creating duplicates of people for various clients. Sometimes for identity theft, sometimes for replacement of deceased loved ones, and sometimes... He paused. Sometimes for people who want a better version of someone they love. I felt sick. Are you saying I ordered this? That I had my wife replaced? No, Agent Foster said quickly. We don't think you had any knowledge of this, but someone in your life might have, someone who thought they were helping you. The answer hit me like a physical blow. My mother. Jessica's head snapped toward me. What? My mother was devastated when we couldn't have kids. She kept talking about how unfair it was, how we deserved a family. She mentioned once that she'd found a specialist who might be able to help, but Jessica didn't want to pursue it. Agent Foster was already on his phone. Get me a warrant for Christine Monroe's phone records and financial statements, and send a unit to her residence. Now. My father called 20 minutes later, confused and frightened. Carter, what's going on? FBI agents just showed up at the house asking about your mother. They're going through her office. Dad, I need you to think carefully. Did Mom ever mention Dr. Caroline Mitchell? Or anyone connected to genetic research? There was a long silence. Then quietly, "There was a woman. About 10 years ago. Your mother was going through a difficult time, worried about you and Jessica not being able to have children. This woman approached her at a charity event, said she might be able to help. Your mother met with her a few times, but she never told me the details, said it was a surprise she was planning." "What kind of surprise?" "I thought it was about adoption or surrogacy, but Carter, your mother would never—" He trailed off, realizing that maybe she would. Maybe she'd been desperate enough to do something terrible if she thought it would make me happy. They found her records 3 hours later. Detailed emails between my mother and Dr. Mitchell, spanning 9 years. Financial transfers totaling over $200,000. And most damning of all, a contract for services rendered. One customized companion, designed to client specifications. Delivered 2015. Jessica was the companion. She'd been created specifically for me, designed to be the perfect wife, the perfect partner. Someone who would never leave, never disappoint, never fail to make me happy. And the original Jessica Monroe, the real woman I'd fallen in love with in that coffee shop, was presumably dead, her identity stolen to create this replacement. When they arrested my mother, she didn't deny it. She sat in the interrogation room, tears streaming down her face, and confessed everything. "I just wanted you to be happy," she said, when I finally agreed to see her. "You and Jessica were trying so hard, and it was breaking my heart watching you suffer. When Dr. Mitchell said she could help, said she could make Jessica perfect, make it so you could finally have the family you wanted, I thought it was a miracle." "Mom, you had someone killed. The real Jessica is dead." "No," my mother said quickly. "That's not what happened. Dr. Mitchell said the original Jessica would just go to sleep, that she'd be preserved, kept safe. It wasn't murder, Carter. It was an exchange." "Where is she?" I demanded. "Where's the real Jessica?" My mother's face crumpled. "I don't know. Dr. Mitchell never told me. She just said she'd be safe, that she'd be cared for." The FBI launched a massive manhunt for Dr. Mitchell and the relocated facility. It took 6 weeks, but they finally found it. A converted warehouse in rural Nevada, housing 23 women in medically induced comas, including the original Jessica Monroe. She was alive, physically healthy, but after 10 years in a coma, her mind was gone. The doctors said there was brain activity, but she'd never wake up. The woman I'd fallen in love with, the real Jessica Monroe, was effectively dead. Standing in that hospital room, looking at the woman in the bed who shared a face with my wife, I felt something break inside me. This was Jessica, the original, the woman, whose life had been stolen so my mother could play God. And at home, waiting for me, was the woman who'd been created from her DNA. The duplicate who'd lived my wife's life, shared my bed, carried her memories and personality. Who was more real? The sleeping woman who'd never wake up, or the one who'd lived and laughed and loved for the past 10 years? Dr. Mitchell was arrested trying to flee to Mexico. She went to trial for 23 counts of kidnapping, illegal human experimentation, and a dozen other charges. She showed no remorse, insisting she'd been performing a valuable service, giving people the loved ones they deserved. My mother pleaded guilty to conspiracy and served 3 years in federal prison. My father divorced her, unable to reconcile what she'd done. He moved to Florida, sending me postcards occasionally but never calling. Some wounds cut too deep for healing. As for Jessica, my Jessica, the woman I'd been married to for 9 years, she had a choice to make. The courts declared her a victim, not a criminal. She was granted full legal identity as Jessica Monroe, with all the rights and protections that entailed. But she had to live with knowing she was created to replace someone, that her entire existence was based on a crime. "I want to stay with you," she told me one night, 6 months after everything came out. "If you'll have me. I know I'm not the original, I know I'm just a copy. But Carter, my love for you is real. My life has been real. Doesn't that count for something?" I looked at her, this woman who was and wasn't my wife, and realized she was right. The original Jessica was gone, lost in a nightmare she'd never wake from. But the woman sitting beside me was alive, real, genuine in every way that mattered. "Yes," I said, taking her hand. "It counts. You count. We're still together. It's been 2 years since the revelation, and we're learning to build a life from the ruins of the one that was stolen from us. Jessica volunteers at a support group for other survivors of Dr. Mitchell's operation, 17 duplicates in total, who are trying to figure out who they are when their entire existence is based on someone else's stolen identity. The original Jessica Monroe remains in a long-term care facility. We visit her sometimes, though it's painful every time. The doctors say she could live for decades in her current state. My Jessica, the duplicate, holds her hand and talks to her, telling her about the life she's living, the life that should have been hers. "I'm taking care of it for you," she whispers. "I promise I'm taking care of the life you should have had." And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can do. Take care of the lives we've been given, regardless of how we got them. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. This is my truth, as strange and impossible as it sounds. I'm Carter Monroe, and I'm married to a woman who is and isn't my wife. And somehow, we're making it work. If this story affected you, please share it with others who need to hear it. Leave a comment below about what you would do in my situation. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more true stories about the extraordinary hidden in the ordinary. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most important question isn't where you came from, but who you choose to be.